Early in the morning, the sun had just started to rise over a quiet street lined with neat houses and trimmed lawns. Birds sang softly in the trees, and the world seemed calm. A black SUV was parked on the side of the road, its engine off. Inside, a man sat in the driver's seat, looking down at his phone. He was dressed neatly in a simple shirt and jeans, relaxed as he scrolled through his messages. He was waiting for a friend who had invited him over for breakfast. Two police officers slowly cruised down the street in their patrol car. They noticed the man almost immediately. One officer nudged the other and gave a suspicious look. Without discussing it much, they decided to stop and check him out. Their car pulled up right behind the SUV, and both officers stepped out. The man noticed them approaching but stayed calm. He put his phone down on the passenger seat and placed both his hands on the steering wheel where they could see them. He knew the importance of staying calm during any encounter with police. The officers didn't greet him or ask if he needed help. Instead, their voices were sharp and demanding. "What are you doing here?" one of them asked, his tone filled with distrust. The man explained in a polite voice, "I'm waiting for a friend. She lives just a few houses down." The officers didn't seem to believe him. They asked for his license and registration in a firm, almost angry way. The man nodded and slowly reached into his pocket to pull out his wallet. He was careful, making no sudden moves. Still, he could feel the tension thick in the air. After handing over his license, the man expected them to check it and move on. But instead, one officer motioned for him to step out of the vehicle. Surprised but still calm, the man obeyed. He stepped out slowly, keeping his hands visible, before he could ask what was wrong. One officer grabbed his arm and twisted it behind his back, snapping on cold metal handcuffs. "What's going on?" the man asked, trying to stay composed. "I haven't done anything wrong." The officers didn't answer. They pressed him against the hood of the car while they talked quietly between themselves. It was clear they had already made up their minds about him, without needing proof. Windows in the nearby houses started to open. A few curious neighbors peeked out, whispering to one another. The man remained quiet, trying not to show the frustration boiling inside him. He knew it wouldn't help to argue. He could only hope they would realize their mistake before it went any further. As he stood there in handcuffs, the morning sun climbing higher in the sky, he wondered how quickly things could turn from peaceful to dangerous, and how assumptions could lead to big mistakes. The man stood silently, the metal cuffs tight around his wrists. The two officers kept throwing quick glances at him, whispering to each other in low voices. They didn't ask any more questions. They didn't give him a chance to explain. In their minds, they had already decided he must have been up to no good. The man's heart beat steadily. He had been through many tough moments before, and he knew that losing his temper now would only make things worse. Instead, he stayed calm and watched them carefully, waiting for the right moment to speak again. One officer began checking his car without asking for permission. He opened the doors and looked inside. The man watched but said nothing. He knew he had nothing to hide, but the way they treated him stung deeply. They saw only the color of his skin, not the kind of person he was. The neighbors started to gather near their doors and windows. Some even stepped onto their porches, phones held up, quietly recording what was happening. A few whispered among themselves, shaking their heads. It was clear to them that the man had done nothing wrong. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't struggling. He was just standing there, silent and patient, while the officers treated him like a criminal. One young boy on a bicycle rode closer to watch. He pulled to a stop and stared wide-eyed at the scene. The boy's mother quickly called him back inside, her face worried. She didn't want her son seeing too much. Meanwhile, the officers grew more nervous. They had expected this situation to be simple. They thought they would quickly catch someone doing something wrong and be praised for it. But instead, they found nothing suspicious in the car. No stolen goods, no weapons, just a coffee cup, a jacket, and the man's phone still lying on the passenger seat. Despite finding nothing, the officers did not let the man go. They still held on to the idea that he must be guilty of something. It didn't seem to matter what the truth was. All that mattered was proving they were right. The man spoke up again, his voice calm but firm. "You were making a mistake," he said. "Please check my ID." One officer rolled his eyes. The other shrugged and muttered, We'll check it when we get to the station." They acted as if his words meant nothing, as if he didn't deserve to be heard. The man fell silent once more. Arguing would not help. He knew that sometimes people refused to see what was right in front of them. He took a slow, deep breath and turned his eyes up toward the sky, where a few white clouds floated peacefully. He had a feeling that the truth would come out soon enough, and when it did, the looks on their faces would tell a story they would never forget. The man stood quietly by his car, his hands still cuffed behind his back. The officers, feeling more confident now that they had him in custody, began to talk louder, acting as if they had caught someone dangerous. They didn't realize that more people were starting to watch from across the street, their faces filled with concern and confusion. One officer radioed for backup, reporting that they had a suspicious man in custody. The word stung, but the man said nothing. He just shifted his weight slightly, feeling the hard cuffs pressing against his wrists. Even though he remained calm, his heart was heavy. He wondered how many others had faced this same unfair treatment. A few minutes later, another police car pulled up. Two more officers got out and walked over, their hands resting near their belts. They looked at the man, then at the officers who had arrested him, and nodded like they already agreed with everything being said. The first officer explained the situation quickly, adding small details that made the man sound guilty without any proof. The man listened carefully. He knew these lies could grow if he didn't stay strong. Nearby, a woman recording the scene whispered to her friend, "He didn't do anything. He was just sitting there." Her friend nodded, her face serious. "They didn't even ask him real questions," she said. The officers seemed to ignore the crowd. They focused only on the man, treating him like a problem they needed to solve. They began searching through his car more roughly now, pulling out small items and tossing them onto the seat without care. A jacket, a pair of sunglasses, a notebook with nothing but work notes written inside. Still, they found nothing wrong, no reason for the arrest, no sign of any crime. The man stayed silent, standing tall despite the tight cuffs and growing embarrassment. He knew his strength wasn't in shouting or fighting. His strength was in his patience, his dignity, and the truth he carried with him. One of the newer officers walked over to him. "You got anything you want to tell us?" he asked, trying to sound tough. The man simply shook his head and said again, "Check my eye." The officer frowned, but didn't check. He turned away, acting like the man's words didn't matter. In that moment, the man realized just how deep their assumptions ran. They had already decided who he was in their minds. It didn't matter what he said or how he acted. They only saw what they wanted to see. But deep inside, the man knew something they didn't. He knew that very soon they would learn the truth. And when they did, everything they thought they knew about him, and maybe even about themselves, would come crashing down. He stood still, the soft breeze brushing past him, waiting for the moment that would change everything. As the man stood by his car, more people began to gather. It was no longer just a few neighbors peeking out of their windows. Now there were families standing on their porches, a group of teenagers sitting on their bikes, and even a few people pulling out their phones to record what was happening. The two officers who had arrested the man didn't seem to notice the growing crowd. They stayed focused on searching the car and whispering to each other. They acted like they were solving the big case, even though they had found nothing at all. One elderly man across the street shook his head sadly. He had lived in the neighborhood for over 30 years and had seen enough to know what was happening. He muttered under his breath, "This ain't right." The man in the cuffs stayed silent. He watched everything carefully but did not speak. He knew that right now, every move he made mattered. Every word he said could either help or hurt him. Patience was his best defense. A little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve and asked, "Why are they being mean to him?" Her mother knelt down and whispered something, keeping her voice low. Even the children could see that something was wrong. One of the teenagers recording the scene turned to his friend and said, "This is messed up. He's not even fighting them. He's just standing there." Meanwhile, the officers grew more frustrated. They couldn't find any reason to hold the man, but they also didn't want to admit they had made a mistake. Pride kept them moving forward when they should have stopped. Finally, one officer said loudly, "We'll take him in and figure it out at the station." He spoke as if the man was just another troublemaker, someone who needed to be dealt with quickly. The man took a deep breath. He knew the time had come. If he let them take him without showing them who he was, the situation could get worse. Quietly, but with firmness, he said, "Before you take me anywhere, check my identification." The second officer, the younger one, hesitated. He looked around and saw all the eyes on them. He noticed the people filming with their phones, the mothers watching protectively, the old man shaking his head. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. The younger officer walked back to the patrol car where they had tossed the man's wallet earlier. He opened it and pulled out a thick badge tucked behind the driver's license. He froze when he saw the words engraved in bold letters. His face went pale. The officer called his partner over in a low voice. The older officer walked over, annoyed, but when he saw what was in his partner's hand, his whole expression changed. Anger melted into fear. Confidence turned into panic. Meanwhile, the man stayed where he was, calm and steady, as if he had known all along that this moment was coming. The crowd leaned forward, sensing that something big was about to happen. The younger officer held the badge tightly in his hand, his fingers trembling slightly. He looked at the man in cuffs and then back at the shiny badge, almost unable to believe what he was seeing. The badge was real. There was no mistake. It clearly said Chief of Police Charles Benson. The older officer stepped back, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. For a moment, both officers just stood there, frozen, not knowing what to do. The people watching from across the street could sense that something important had just happened, even if they didn't know the full truth yet. The man, Chief Benson, remained silent. He didn't need to say anything. The badge spoke for itself. Finally, the younger officer took a shaky step forward. Sir," he said awkwardly. We didn't realize." His voice faded away, the words too weak to fix what had already been done. The older officer hurried to unlock the handcuffs. His hands fumbled with the keys, and it took longer than it should have. When the cuffs finally clicked open, Chief Benson slowly brought his hands in front of him, rubbing his wrists where the metal had pressed against his skin. "You should have asked," Chief Benson said quietly, his voice calm but full of power. "You should have listened." The officers looked like they wanted to disappear. They stammered out half-formed apologies, but the words didn't mean much. It was clear they weren't sorry for what they had assumed. They were sorry they had gotten caught. Around them, the crowd grew more restless. People started talking louder, some shaking their heads, others calling out, "You better apologize right." And this is what's wrong with the system. The younger officer looked like he wanted to explain himself, but there was nothing he could say that would make the situation right. Chief Benson watched him for a long moment, his eyes steady and unreadable. Then, without raising his voice, Chief Benson said, "I will be speaking with your supervisor today." The officers nodded quickly, eager to end the moment. The younger one even tried to force a small, nervous smile, but it only made things worse. The crowd could see the fear and regret written all over their faces. Chief Benson turned and calmly began picking up his things from the car seat. His jacket, his notebook, his coffee cup. He moved with slow care, showing everyone watching that he was still in control. One of the neighbors called out, "Thank you for staying calm, sir." Another added, "We're with you." Chief Benson gave a small nod toward them, a silent thank you for their support. He knew this day was not just about him. It was about every person who had ever been treated unfairly simply because of how they looked. As he stood beside his car, the officers shrinking back toward their cruiser, Chief Benson understood that the real work was just beginning. Chief Benson stood quietly for a moment, feeling the morning sun warmed his face. The crowd across the street stayed in place, their eyes following his every move. Even though he had been treated unfairly, he showed no anger. He showed no signs of shouting or losing control. He carried himself with the quiet strength that came from years of leadership and patience. The two officers stood near their patrol car, looking lost. They kept glancing at each other, waiting for Chief Benson to say something else, something that might forgive their mistake. But Chief Benson wasn't in a rush. He knew that sometimes silence could speak louder than words. Finally, he pulled out his phone and made a simple call. "This is Chief Benson," he said clearly. "I need the district captain to meet me here immediately." His voice was steady, without a hint of emotion. The officers heard every word, and the fear on their faces grew even deeper. As he ended the call, Chief Benson looked around at the people who had gathered. He nodded to a few of them in thanks. Without them, who knows how far things might have gone. Their presence had helped hold the officers back, forcing them to think twice before making the situation worse. An older woman from across the street shouted, "We're proud of you." Her voice cracked slightly with emotion. Chief Benson smiled softly and gave her a small wave. Soon, another police car pulled up. This time, a tall man in a clean uniform stepped out. It was the district captain. He walked quickly toward Chief Benson, confusion written all over his face. When he saw the two officers standing stiffly by their patrol car and noticed the crowd recording everything, his face grew serious. Chief Benson didn't waste time. He calmly explained what had happened, speaking just loud enough for the captain and everyone nearby to hear. He told the story with no extra anger, no raised voice, just the simple truth. The captain's face darkened as he listened. He turned toward the two officers, who now looked like they wished they could vanish into the ground. "You two," the captain barked, "get back to the station. Now." His voice was sharp, leaving no room for argument. The officers hurried to their car without a word. They drove away under the heavy gaze of the crowd, who made no effort to hide their disapproval. The captain turned back to Chief Benson. "Sir, I am deeply sorry for what happened here today," he said. His voice was respectful but also filled with shame. "This is not how we are supposed to serve this community." Chief Benson nodded slowly. He knew an apology wouldn't erase what happened, but it was a start. The real work would come later, when real changes had to be made. He glanced once more at the crowd, at the faces filled with hope and anger and sadness. He knew they deserved better, and he promised himself he would not stop fighting until they got it. After the officers left, Chief Benson stayed by his car for a few more minutes. He spoke quietly with the district captain, making sure the incident would not be brushed under the rug. The captain promised a full review and serious action, but Chief Benson knew promises were easy. Real change took more than just words. As they finished speaking, Chief Benson turned toward the crowd. They were still gathered waiting, hoping to hear something from him. They had watched everything. They had stood with him even when they didn't know who he was. He walked a few steps closer to them. The people grew quiet, their eyes fixed on him. The children, the teenagers, the parents, the grandparents, they all listened closely. "Thank you," Chief Benson said, his voice carrying clearly through the street. "Thank you for standing here. Thank you for caring about what's right." The crowd nodded, some calling out small words of support. Chief Benson could feel the weight of the moment. It wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had ever been judged too quickly or treated unfairly. "This should never have happened," he continued. "Not to me, not to anyone." A teenager holding a phone spoke up. "What happens now, sir?" Chief Benson paused. He looked around at the many faces watching him. "Now," he said slowly, "we work harder, we train better, we listen more, and we make sure that respect is given to every single person, every single day." The crowd seemed to stand a little taller at his words. Even the little kids seemed to understand that something important was being promised. Someone shouted, "We need more leaders like you." Chief Benson smiled at that. Not a big smile, but a real one. He knew leadership wasn't about titles or badges. It was about how you treated people when no one was looking, and especially when everyone was looking. He could see the hope in their eyes, but he also saw the hurt. What happened today had left a mark. It would take time to heal it. Before walking back to his car, Chief Benson made one more promise to them all. "This is our community. It belongs to all of us. We will protect it. We will fix what is broken. And we will do it together." There was a soft cheer from the crowd. Not loud, but full of heart. Chief Benson got into his car, took a deep breath, and started the engine. As he drove away slowly, he glanced in the mirror and saw the people still standing there, stronger and more united than before. Across the screen, a small line appeared, encouraging everyone watching. "If you believe in fairness and change, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories." Chief Benson knew the road ahead would be long, but he was ready. And now, he wasn't walking it alone. Chief Benson drove slowly through the streets of the town he had sworn to protect. Every building, every street corner, and every park held memories. He had worked hard for years to build trust between the police and the people. Today's event reminded him that trust was fragile. It could be damaged in seconds, but took years to rebuild. He pulled into the parking lot of the police station. The building stood tall, a symbol of service and responsibility. He sat in the car for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He knew many inside had heard about what happened. He also knew that real leadership meant facing the hard moments, not running from them. Walking through the doors, Chief Benson felt every pair of eyes turned toward him. Some looked down in shame. Others watched carefully, unsure what he would do next. The two officers who had arrested him were nowhere in sight. They had been ordered to stay off duty until the investigation was complete. Chief Benson headed straight to the meeting room, where the department's leadership team waited. Captains, lieutenants, and senior officers filled the room. The air was heavy with silence. He stood at the front and looked at each one of them, not with anger, but with steady determination. "What happened this morning cannot be ignored," he began. His voice was calm but strong. "It wasn't just about me. It was about the way we see the people we are supposed to protect." Some officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others nodded slightly, agreeing with every word. "We will rebuild trust," he continued. "We will retrain, we will listen, and we will be better. Not just because we got caught, but because it is the right thing to do." He laid out a clear plan. Every officer would go through new training programs focused on respect, fairness, and understanding. Every complaint would be taken seriously. The community would have more chances to share their voices and be heard. "No badge," he said. "No uniform gives us the right to treat anyone as less than human." The room stayed silent, but something changed. It was a small shift, like the first signs of a storm breaking into clear skies. After the meeting, Chief Benson walked outside again. The sun was lower now, painting the town in soft gold. He thought about the people who had stood by him earlier. He thought about the little girl who asked why someone was being treated unfairly. He knew he was fighting for her future too. As he stood there, a young officer approached him quietly. "Sir," the young man said, "I want to help. I want to be part of the change." Chief Benson smiled gently and placed a hand on the young officer's shoulder. "Then let's get to work," he said. The road ahead was long, but Chief Benson was ready. This was more than one day's battle. This was a mission, and he was not alone anymore. Together, they would build something better for everyone.